The time now 18 minutes past 4. And the companies behind 42 salmon farms that failed to comply with environment protection measures have been named by a campaign group. Scottish Salmon Watch has released information obtained from the environmental regulator SEPA in a bid to shame the firms involved. Our reporter, Ewan Murray, has been following the story and joins us now. Good afternoon, Ewan. What's the background to this story?
Well, this data comes from SEPA's annual compliance assessments for regulated fish farms. Essentially, it's a report card that shows how closely each farm is sticking to the terms of its operating licence. Now, the latest figures are for 2016, and they show that around 42 salmon farms and also a handful of trout farms were rated by SEPA as poor or very poor because of non-compliance with rules. So to put that into context, that's around 15% of all Scottish salmon farms not complying with their environmental licences. Now, a version of these figures was already published by SEPA on their website. However, they didn't name any of the companies involved, and that's why Scottish Salmon Watch has obtained that data and published it online.
What environmental regulations did they actually fail to comply with?
Well, the reasons for non-compliance varied from farm to farm, but in several cases they included issues with unsatisfactory seabed surveys. So, for example, water sampling at one farm showed that levels of a toxic pesticide there were 10 times above the acceptable limit. Another farm was found to have breached discharge limits after leaking effluent into a loch. But there were also some less serious breaches which still resulted in a poor rating. For example, with farms not complying with issues like cage configuration. Now, SEPA says it's clear that compliance with all of these regulations is absolutely non-negotiable. However, Don Staniford from Scottish Salmon Watch says he believes the regulator isn't being heavy-handed enough.
Even with the low benchmarks that SEPA has for compliance, you've got over 50 fish farms failing. Now, that's, as other sectors go, it's one of the biggest fails in terms of a sector. And salmon farms are the bulk of the fish farming non-compliance. So I think it's very serious.
So which companies have they named?
Well, the worst offender with regards to this was Norwegian-owned Scottish Sea Farms, which had 10 sites fail SEPA's compliance assessments. However, they say that 7 of these sites have since improved to comply with regulations. Norwegian-owned Marine Harvest and Canadian company Cook Aquaculture closely followed, both with 9 failing farms. Marine Harvest says it's working with SEPA to address issues and comply with regulations. Cook didn't respond to our request for a comment.
What sort of reaction has there been to this?
Well, the Scottish Salmon Producers Organisation has admitted today that some of the results were disappointing. However, their spokesman, Davy Sanderson, says that around 85% of farms did comply, so for that reason, he's optimistic about the wider picture.
Companies will have specific sites that they have to make some sort of remedial plans for if they've not been compliant across all the range of things they get measured on, but that's something that happens regularly between the regulator and the company concerned, and we would expect that any specific action would have to be followed up on if that wasn't satisfactory from the regulator's point of view. So it's good news all round.
As you'd expect, Scottish Salmon Watch claim it's yet more evidence that the industry needs to clean up its act. This is also against the backdrop of an ongoing Holyrood inquiry into the environmental impact of the industry. Earlier this year, the Environment Committee published a paper saying that the marine ecosystem could face irrecoverable damage from salmon farming if concerns aren't addressed. But as you'll know, salmon is big business in Scotland. It's already the country's largest food export, worth £600 million a year. So improving its compliance with all environmental regulations is going to be really important to make sure that any expansion will be sustainable in the long term.
Ewan, thank you. That's Ewan Murray, our reporter in Shetland there. Now, Scottish windsurfer